So just for kicks, if there were a disorder for being neurotypical, diagnostic criteria might look something like A person with NSCD has less than intense passion for any subject or special interest and is unable to focus for longer than 12 hours on any subject aside from electronics use. They also quickly switch from thoughts and ideas and topics and tasks, and basically this is rendering them unable to be expert in any area in a short period of time. B, they've got a lack of awareness of potential problems that could occur in crowded public places, in large groups of people, and in situations where the intent and personalities of others is unknown. C, the person becomes distressed when alone. They need noises to not feel uncomfortable in silence, and they can't entertain themselves well all alone. They seek out validation in the presence of others in most matters through eye contact or pointless.
This again, as he said, he's kidding. He's not trying to make an offense towards people. But this is really, I think that this can be something that really changes people's minds on it, because they understand, I guess, what it is like to be a different type of person, what we can feel, because we kind of reframe it, we flip the script and sort of allow people to put themselves in that position and be like, oh, okay. I mean, it does sound disordered if you think of it as not part of the norm, but yeah, and that's the whole idea of the social model. It's like, if everyone was autistic, neurotypicals would have their own diagnosis. It's true. It's true.
Pointless small talk. They're taught that providing untruthful information to others is being polite and constantly seek praise from others through social media. All right. Of course, this idea of pathologizing neurotypical people is just a joke. But seriously, they say autistic people have challenges with shifting between ideas, thoughts, and tasks. I say neurotypical people have a hard time concentrating on their passion long enough to actually be great at it and bring them joy. They say autistic people become distressed when exposed to too many stimuli at once. I say neurotypicals have created unnecessary chaos and chronic overstimulation everywhere so that they can create and sell treatments like anti-anxiety medications, ADHD medications, spa treatments, vacation packages, all aimed at lowering our natural response to the artificial, unnecessary chaos.
Yeah. Not too sure about that one. Most people may view autism as being a disorder. I mean, it's classified in terms of the medical literature as being a difficulty with things such as socializing, sensory difficulties. But is that really the way that we should be perceiving people with ASD, autism spectrum disorder? Or is it actually our society that is not built for us? Today we're going to have a look at a video from the Neurodivergent Doctor called Autism, the New View, the World is Disordered. We're going to have a look at that and perhaps talk a little bit about the medical versus social model of disability.
Hello, Neurodivergent Nation. This is Dr. Service, and today I thought we should discuss what I've been noticing about how autism is presented and viewed by the world, what I see the real problem is, and what it looks like to be a healthy autistic person. Nearly everything out there about autism comes from a pathological viewpoint, which means that the world has been solely focusing on what they think is wrong with autistic people. Do you ever hear anyone in the scientific community talking about what's right with autistic people and focusing on what's wrong with the world autistic people live in? When people are late diagnosed with autism, I often hear the same story about how others don't know what to think of them, and they've spent their whole lives feeling like nobody understands them. They're basically feeling like they're a giant walking question mark.
You know, I get a lot of people sort of sending me messages on Instagram, and a few people sort of popping up in chat to sort of share their experiences, and it is a very, common thing. I've heard a very cool speaker called Brian Bird. He's not the most well known about. He has an Instagram account called Autism Spectrum Community. He mostly posts memes and stuff, but he does a few really sort of interesting talks. He was diagnosed quite late in his life. He describes it as having a second teenagehood, second puberty, where there's so much personal growth, personal understanding that comes with this kind of new revelation that it literally feels like you're becoming a different or like you're viewing yourself in a different way, sort of becoming your true self, like uncovering some great mystery to your life. 100%. And I like the wording that he's talking about with the pathological kind of lens, because I think that's something that's not perhaps mentioned enough when professionals are speaking about it. I think it would be good just at a baseline to say, okay, this is like a very medical view. This is very like talking about like autism in terms of like pathology, which is how, granted, a lot of things are diagnosed in society. You know, we diagnose problems, we don't diagnose identity.
Society is genuinely puzzled by autistic individuals. The ideas that society has about autism are largely misguided. They're short-sighted, ignorant, contradictory, and for the most part, unhelpful. You see, autism is not what most of the internet and the world says about it. Autism, it's not just a set of problems and deficiencies. Usually what others think of autism is actually something else, like anxiety or mania or depression or other sort of disorders. And when mixed with autism, people often assume it's just autism.
And people sometimes incorrectly label things as autistic as well, I found. Like, it's used a lot within like gaming communities as like a meme. It's like, oh, that's pretty autistic, or I'm being autistic. I hear it a lot used in that way. I find it, I like a good autism joke, you know, like if it's a good one. A lot of the ways that people use it are just like as a derogatory term. Like it doesn't make any sense particularly. There's no meaning to it. Like they say, you know, they do something wrong in their game and they say, oh, I'm being autistic. It's like, nope. If you were really autistic, you'd be like, you've researched the code behind it and like understood the game, and you can do everything like tick perfect and just like, you know, bang it out, or you know all the pieces of information about a certain method within the game, or the background and the history and the secrets behind it. That would be a bit more of an autism thing, I would say, but I digress.
Or they don't see the autism at all and they're just misdiagnosed with some other disorder like trauma or personality disorders.
100%.
So if society is not going to ask the right questions and science focuses almost completely on the question of what's wrong with autistic people, let's you and I ask better questions. What does autism look like in a person when they've not been completely traumatized by a society that doesn't support it? What's an autistic person like who's doing really well? These are all good questions, so let's answer them now.
I know some unicorns like that out there. I call them unicorns because it's hard. It's hard to find autistic people who aren't tainted by, like, I don't mean that in a bad way, but aren't sort of experienced negative things in life to a point where it's impacted their mental health. Like, it's very, 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 very common. I do have know some people who report themselves to be not like impacted by the world, but are, and then other people who genuinely just like do pretty well. Those people tend to have pretty okay childhoods. Not a lot of bullying, discrimination, things of that nature. They tend to have very supportive parents. Sometimes, often, like within the teaching profession, and they've generally been like sort of exposed to different things, you know, gently exposed to different things in the world in order to experience them, see what they're like, see what they're good at, given the opportunity to flourish. Perhaps it's very rare to find people like that, but they do exist, and they often go without a diagnosis as well, which is you know, another thing, I suppose.
Number one, for some autistic individuals, autism is being able to recognize the smaller details that neurotypical people don't, because neurotypical people are often so concerned with the social rules of behavior. You see, autistic people tend to have different operating patterns in their frontal lobe and occipital lobes, which allow them to see patterns and details, sometimes better than others. Number two.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the occipital lobe is sort of related to like, I think I'm getting the right lobe. The lobe for like vision that processes like visual things is at the back of the brain. It's so strange how that works. But yeah, frontal lobe differences, comes with all like differences in executive function. It's kind of like the control center of your brain, somewhat. Some people relate it to like being sort of our sense of consciousness even.
Along that same vein, many autistic people are very good at recognizing patterns in various settings. They try to make sense of deeper systems within a variety of things, including social settings. They can often see unnoticeable patterns in human behavior, in comedy, in ant colonies, in architecture. And many see systemic structures and levels of beauty in their environment that neurotypical people often don't. And they can find delight in observing others, especially when they learn to mimic someone and it results in a successful connection with somebody else.
Very impressed so far. I think this is going to be a good video, guys. Awesome. I mean, speaking facts.
Many are very rule-driven. That's our third one, which means there's consistency. They might think, if this happens and that's the result, then this is what I can expect going forward. This means you can usually count on an autistic person to follow that pattern themselves if they see it being beneficial. Now, some autistic people may appear to be inconsistent, but if you look deeper into their thought process, usually you'll see a great deal of rule-driven behavior and consistency. So when the world out there sees an erratic autistic person, a woman who maybe appears to be contradicting herself all over the place, chances are she's reacting to the internal rules that she's developed that are not working well in that situation. So notice I said that they like rules and consistency, not that their rules always work well in every situation.
100%. I mean, this is kind of pointing to this like idea that Professor Simon Cohen was talking about, with the idea of like systematizing, sort of approaching the world in kind of a step-by-step kind of logical fashion. I know a lot of people don't like him as a researcher due to like the neurogendering kind of controversy that's gone on. But I somewhat relate to that. I mean, if you haven't seen it before, it's called the ES theory, empathizing, systemizing theory. Basically like an attempt to separate autistic people from neurotypicals by seeing the relationship between like the levels of like outward sort of, I mean, it's empathizing, but I don't think it's literally about how much empathy you have for people. I think it's more about like social understanding, etc., compared to systemizing, which is all about these kind of rules that are embedded logically, kind of dissecting, understanding things, following rules. I mean, I relate to it. I know a lot of some people who don't. I don't know if you guys see the same. Most things in life create set patterns. How can you not see it? It's so in your face. I mean, a lot of people don't, And it's the thing that I find interesting about autism, particularly in the social, psychological context, because to a certain extent, it's kind of like we're behind in terms of like understanding sort of neurotypical social interactions. But we can get to a point, if we're really interested in it, where we kind of surpass others and understand more about like the greater context of how someone's interacting, which can allow us to have a bit more insight into like human behavior and things like that. It's very interesting. I know a few people like that. Dr. Megan Neff being one of them. Really interesting.
Many autistic people say that they see no use in judging others by their home or their job or how a person looks. They often look beyond social expectations and just know if they like you or not, and if you make them feel good. That's pretty much it. Number 5, most autistic people say what they mean and mean what they say. Even during a meltdown, you can be fairly confident what they're saying is exactly how they feel at that moment. It may change after they feel different, but you usually don't have to guess as to whether or not an autistic person is trying to trick you or lie to you. There's usually no underlying sneaky motives or hurtful agenda that they're getting at.
I'd say that we have a preference towards direct communication. I don't think that means that we don't lie, that we don't deceive, that we don't manipulate. I don't know many autistic people who do that. I do know a lot of autistic people who are genuinely nice, but they do kind of lie a lot. like I know that they do lie a lot, but I can see it, so it's not, and other people can see it, so it's not necessarily an issue. It's kind of little things here and there that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, but they just lie about them. Yeah, we do, but generally when we do say something, it tends to be direct rather than trying to express it in some kind of indirect way.
Number 6, they can become intently focused on certain things, which may develop into a strength. Their conceptual understanding and attention to details is something that they're very interested in. That can be a very valuable asset to others and to the world.
Clip of Fortnite. I mean, yeah. Taekwondo, big thing for me. 100%. Got to like an international level. Gold in the nationals, gold in the Commonwealth. I got to a very high level just because I was just so focused on it all the time. Used to train all the time. When I got there, I was solely focused on training. I didn't socialize with people. I was just like training my ass off. And then when I got home, I'd do some more exercises and try and like build my strength up, and I'd research going to the gym and such, some things that not a lot of people did. 100%. And it's that whole idea, as you said, David, monotropism, yeah. Tendency of something to pull us in. A singular thing that gets all of our attention. That kind of autistic inertia or hyperfocus that we might feel. Can be good. Also, can sometimes be detrimental to like overall functioning in the long term. In terms of like eating, drinking, making sure to take rests if your anxiety is rising due to a problem. Those kind of things can sometimes be an issue.
Number 7, they can be fantastic employees, giving their all to their job while they're there, trying to avoid drama and largely contributing in ways neurotypical people cannot. Number 8, they think about...
Yep, and they've shown with some statistical studies that autistic people actually, given the right environment around them, are quite a bit more productive than the average person.
About problems differently, which promotes different solutions that may solve problems better than traditional approaches. Number 9, when you ask a question to an autistic person, if they have an answer for you, you'll likely get the raw, unfiltered answer. If you don't want to know the truth, don't ask an autistic person. It won't make sense to them to try to sugarcoat anything. They'll usually just give it to you the way it's in their mind. So, no games, and I think that's pretty great also.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's one thing that I can get behind. The brutal honesty. So sometimes it's good, and you know where you stand with people who are like direct and honest about stuff. Not everybody, of course, but majority of autistic people that I've come across tend to be that way, yeah.
Number 10, an autistic person can be your best friend, and they can be very loyal. They're naturally very trusting until they're betrayed too many times. But they expect an open, honest relationship that's not built on expectations that don't align with what they want. Additionally, they're more likely to have fewer good friends and may not readily engage in traditional, typical, and expected friendship behaviors. You may not get a call as often, and they may not feel the need to attend events that they're not interested in, but there is a strong connection there.
100. I love that point. That is a really good point. It's true, and I think it's mostly because it's quite hard for us to find like good people who want to understand us, who want to kind of accept us. My best friend's neurotypical. She's great, and we hardly ever talk. And she knows that's not like me not liking her or me not wanting to be friends with her. It's just kind of my social battery day by day is quite difficult to manage. And if I was to implement it into my routine, every night before bed, I message this person, then maybe I could do it. But I've asked people if they wanted me to do that, and they said no. Because it's kind of like a false, like, I'm forcing myself to do it, and that's not really how people want. White lies. I can't lie to direct questions. I find it quite difficult, I would say. I'm not going to say that I have never lied in my life. Like, I think everybody does to a certain extent in some different ways. I think when it comes to like really big issues, definitely not.
Contrary to what the world believes, an autistic person is highly empathic and they can sometimes feel things with such intensity that they actually need a break from it. They can usually have a very strong idea of right and wrong and what makes sense and what does not, and things like injustice and unfairness really don't do well in their mind. When they resonate with a certain cause, they may go all in, and they may even go so far as to create an organization to work towards solutions because basically nobody else is. Number 12, many autistic people.
Yeah, and I think that there is definitely some merit to that, and I think a lot of autistic people tend to have a lot of empathy, particularly for others who are different. It doesn't necessarily have to be autism, it could be any difference that someone has. I have found that autistic people generally tend to feel a lot more in that sense, 100%. I also know that sometimes we can sometimes be blinded a little bit by the passion that we feel about changing something. I think sometimes it is really useful for like societal change and etc. But I do think some individuals may need to like take a step back and kind of assess different viewpoints sometimes. Not everybody, of course. But just like anyone else in the world, sometimes like we can sometimes be a bit too strong with our perspective and not sort of consider other people's so much. Just anybody, just not any human being, not just autistic people.
Autistic people will see things very logically, often seeing things as right or wrong, black or white, yes or no. When others see gray area, many autistic people don't, possibly because they understand the subject differently, or they may have more knowledge on it than you do, or it simply doesn't make logical sense to them. They tend to be less susceptible to something neurotypical people suffer from called the framing effect, which has to do with making decisions based purely on emotion. So when neurotypical people make decisions based on emotion, it often leads to problems. Many times, individuals who are autistic are less likely to be affected by that.
That's a really interesting point. I mean, I'm definitely a lot more of kind of logical in the way that I approach things and understand things, but the framing effects, really cool thing to talk about, because I think that's a lot to do with autistic alexithymia. Difficulty identifying, noticing your emotions. It's kind of like a threshold condition. I know I talk about it a lot. Your emotions do have a large impact on your decision making. For autistic people, sometimes it is kind of a little bit dulled. Sometimes we do make impulse purchases and our emotions do drive us to buy things because we're human. Cause us to do things that we wouldn't necessarily see as logical. But I think in general, most of the time, it doesn't have as much of a hold on us. I think there was some kind of video or that we watched before, and definitely with my own life where, particularly things like sales or marketing or advertising doesn't seem to have as much of a hold on us.
Number 13, they're usually very willing to share information and resources related to their areas of interest and passion that they want you to also experience, and that's an amazing thing. And that's very kind and caring of them to do that. So listen to them and you may learn something because in my experience, there's a good reason for their level of interest, passion, and expertise. Many autistic people are capable of superhuman things. The reason for this is because they've already been through so many very difficult things and difficult emotions, difficult situations and circumstances, things they never asked for, things they never signed up for. A lot of them, it requires so much strength and effort just to get out of bed in the morning and show up to work or show up to wherever they have to show up to that a lot of neurotypical people have never experienced that, and they might not understand.
100%. Man, who is this person? Dropping them a subscribe. My lord, this man's speaking facts. What was he saying before about
has to do with making decisions based purely on emotion. They're usually very willing to share information and
sharing information. Yeah, 100%. I mean, like one of the things that I say to pretty much any person that I work with is like, if you see something that you want to use out of my content, this goes for anybody, you want to use anything from my content, just use it. Like, you don't need to ask permission. I'd appreciate some kind of like, like shout out perhaps around it. you know, sharing a link or something, but you don't need to. I think as long as as long as I'm contributing to like some level of change or some level of like help towards people, I'm happy. Like it fulfills me a lot. It doesn't necessarily have to all be about like, well, this is my content kind of. That's my personal view. I know for other people it's different. But it's 100% like I feel that very, very deeply. You know, just want people to know. Do you like my new haircut? It's not right for your face shape. I'm laughing because that is exactly the type of thing that goes on in my brain. Nowadays, I tend to, if it's a negative response, and I don't know them very well, I just tend to keep to myself. They can kind of tell that I'm like, I won't say, oh, it looks great, but I'll say, this is definitely different. You know, I'll say something like that, you know, and it will kind of come across as me being like patronizing or something, but I just can't. Like, it's difficult. Like, someone's asking me my genuine opinion on something. I'm like, man, like, I don't know. It might grow on me, you know. I used to get very dogmatic with my view is correct, and I end up in arguments. I've stepped back a bit, even though sometimes it upsets me too. Yeah, I have definitely been like that, you know, very kind of stuck in my ways sometimes in the past. Not saying that you are, but definitely for myself, I was very like, this is what makes sense. This is what you shouldn't do, and you know, I think there is some level of being like, okay, you know, I think the point at which I stopped thinking in that way and started, you know, thinking a lot more grey, because I don't agree with the fact that all autistic people think in black and white. I'd say that a lot of humans think in black and white in general, and society can be very black and white. I don't think it's just an autistic thing. It's just that we tend to have different views, I think, on certain things, and it's categorized in that fashion. And it's easier, and it's kind of like setting a rule. It's like, this is right, this is wrong. You know, there's no like, oh, okay, this is kind of right in this way. It's just a bit easier and nicer just to say, okay, this is wrong. Nope. You know? That's my thoughts on it. Not saying that I'm right. This is my opinion. It's my grey opinion. I upset my mother the other day about her new coat. Look, I warn people who are close to me. I say to them, look, you know I'm autistic. I mean, it's good because if you ask me stuff, I will be honest about it. But with that honesty, you also have to take the possibility that I don't agree with you on such a thing. So I always try to have that conversation with people.
For a lot of them, it requires so much strength and effort just to get out of bed in the morning and show up to work or show up to wherever they have to show up to, that a lot of neurotypical people have never experienced that, and they might not understand. Imagine if you wore a backpack all the time, and throughout the day, people would just come along and give you weight, put in your backpack. Sometimes you put it in yourself, sometimes they do it for you. But all throughout the day, these little pieces of weight, these little bits, these expectations, these punishments, all these things that you never agreed to, they tend to add up over time. Now imagine carrying that around all day, every day. Eventually, you become extremely strong in those areas. Okay, now that we've identified that autistic people aren't just a set of problems to be misunderstood.
I thought he was going to make a different point there, because that kind of sounded like he was going to talk about like PDA. Like demands and expectations, but
And I've listed just a few of the millions of pretty amazing things about autism and about autistic people. Let's take a careful look at the world that we have no choice but to live in. We all live in a society right now that's confusing and stressful. It's contradictory. It's shameless. It's full of unnecessary sounds and lights. It's ripe with trickery and it's hypocritical. It's overwhelmingly and artificially smelly, and it's dangerous on many levels.
In this neurotypical world we live in, women are constantly being told what acceptable beauty standards look like. The standards are impossible, but hey, luckily the same companies that tell us what the standards are, they'll also sell you some expensive solutions, so.
Studies suggest the average person lies to others several times each day, usually in small, confusing.
And I think as well, for men, I've seen it a lot more within like the fitness industry, I would say. Or like you see like different YouTube channels that are popping up about like looks maxing and things like that. Which I think can be somewhat helpful in a sense, but like it's always geared towards like a product, like sales, something like that, there's good and bad to this kind of stuff, I would say. And some people, it can actually have really detrimental effects on their overall life when they're trying to meet these standards that they just, it's just out of the question of being able to achieve them.
Confusing white lies. These daily acts of accepted social dishonesty is part of this neurotypical world. When you go out to buy a car, it's also understood that the seller bumps up the price and the buyer talks the price down. Now, why is that? Why don't they just ask for what they want and be done with it? This is the neurotypical world we live in.
In some cultures, it's rude and aggressive to look other people in the eye. In the United States, however, it's considered culturally appropriate and expected, especially in the business world. Studies suggest...
This is so interesting. So, I made that video recently about like fake disorder grins and like self-diagnosis and things of that nature. A lot of the diagnosis criteria is very subjective, depending on where you live, depending on the culture around you, what is considered to be like the norm in said culture, can all have really big impacts on whether someone is determined to be different or not.
Just that the reason we do this is to either form a more intimate connection or to see if the person is being dishonest, see what their ulterior motives are. Either way, this is the neurotypical world we live in.
You ever walked into a big box home improvement store? Walk down the lighting section and you'll go blind. Listen for a moment and you'll hear ear-piercing, annoying beeps, alarms everywhere, clanging pipes. The overhead system is like speaking some sort of unintelligible announcement. An unhelpful associate with bad breath wants to come and ask you questions about your topic or about your project that they don't know anything about, and they only offer you the wrong information in return.
Dude. A little warning, please. Oh my God. It's bringing me back to my days sifting through items at IKEA. Ugh.
The products themselves may be hard to find the price of if they're on the right shelf at all, and when you actually do need help with something, the associates all seem to have vanished. And this is the neurotypical world we all shop in. By the way, no disrespect to our retail workers. We all love you. So let's not even get started on government contradictions and hypocrisy. We all know it's all there. It never gets resolved.
You okay? Sort of. I mean, it kind of hit me out of the blue a little bit. I guess I should habituate to it a little bit more. I'm scared of them. I'm scared of the noises, guys. Yeah, with the backpack, I thought you would say that it become loaded at the end of the day, not that you become stronger. Yeah. I thought he was going to talk about like the Coke bottle effect, stress is adding up, or like trigger stacking or something like that.
And that's the sick, disordered world we all have no choice but to live in. So, just a real quick recap before we go on. We now know what autism is and what it looks like when not traumatized by a neurotypical society. We know how the society we live in is actually very, very sick. It's disordered, it is diseased, it is dysfunctional, and it's only getting worse, and it doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. Current pathological-based ideas about autism that have come from the scientific community are based solely on the difficulties an autistic person has in trying to assimilate or live in this world that is contradictory and shame-based and disordered and intentionally confusing and dishonest. That's the world that we live in.
100%. And I'd say that this view is also reflected in people who aren't autistic as well, which is the interesting thing. A lot of people don't see sense in a lot of the stuff that happens and the systems that we have, you know. And that's why we have a lot of autistic people like innovators, because they're like, do we need to do it that way? You know, what? Why, guys? And so this kind of brings us to what I was going to talk about. I said that I was going to talk about, which is the medical and social model of disability. He was talking particularly about sort of the medical view of viewing everything as like pathological that the autistic person does. It's basically the view that the issues that autistic people experience and the issues that other people have with autistic people are due to being that person and that person's disorder. So it's placing the blame on the individual. The social model of disability, which I think can be applied to some other neurodivergencies, is a lot to do with the interaction between a different person with the world, which is it's not necessarily built for them.
It's like trying to put whipped cream on a turd and wondering why it still smells like crap. Underneath, it's still a turd, and this turd of a society is kind of a turd. So consider autism from this new, fresh vantage point where society is actually what is disordered, and natural autistic traits may very well be the part of the solution that we're looking for. Consider the idea that many of the people throughout history who've moved society forward in a positive way were or are highly suspected of being autistic. So, if the positive traits of autism are not really problematic, but simply clash with this disordered turd of a world we live in, then we have to ask why neurotypical people aren't bothered by it more than they are. And if they do control it, because they greatly outnumber the neurodivergent, why aren't they doing what makes sense in changing it? I mean, in this context, why isn't there a disorder based on the obvious and glaring problems with being neurotypical? Maybe it would be something called neurotypical social cognitive disorder, or
neurotypical syndrome. I mean, I wouldn't consider everybody to have that syndrome, but some people like an obsession with social interaction and unwritten rules. You know, you imagine like an autistic society with neurotypicals, and it's like, you know, these people are really concerned with like social hierarchies, like that just don't exist for some reason. Like, little things like that. This person has a lack of response to normal sensory stimuli. So much of what NTs say and do makes no sense. Yeah, I mean, I don't wish to like come across as like making fun of or hating neurotypicals myself. I'm not saying that you are, Tracy. But I just want to make that clear to anyone who's watching. Like, I'm not. It's just kind of flipping the script to like see, I guess, what it can be like for an autistic person trying to like be a part of a world that's not built for them. Flip the script a little bit, kind of illuminates some things, I would say. Not all of them. Yeah, of course, Tracy. Yeah. I just want to make that clear because I have had some people who've got, you know, perhaps upset about the way that I phrased things. You know, because obviously I'm talking from an autistic standpoint. I'm not trying to like group everybody into one box, which I guess sounds a bit weird speaking as like a minority group, but I think it's also important, you know, 100%.
SCD for short. So just for kicks, if there were a disorder for being neurotypical, diagnostic criteria might look something like A person with NSCD has less than intense passion for any subject or special interest and is unable to focus for longer than 12 hours on any subject aside from electronics use. They also quickly switch from thoughts and ideas and topics and tasks, and basically this is rendering them unable to be expert in any area in a short period of time. B, they've got a lack of awareness of potential problems that could occur in crowded public places, in large groups of people, and in situations where the intent and personalities of others is unknown. C, the person becomes distressed when alone. They need noises to not feel uncomfortable in silence, and they can't entertain themselves well all alone. They seek out validation in the presence of others in most matters through eye contact or pointless.
Man, this again, as he said, he's kidding. He's not trying to make an offense towards people. But this is really, I think that this can be something that really changes people's minds on it, because they understand, I guess, what it is like to be a different type of person, what we can feel, because we kind of reframe it, we flip the script and sort of allow people to put themselves in that position and be like, oh, okay. I mean, it does sound disordered if you think of it as not part of the norm, but yeah, and that's the whole idea of the social model. It's like, if everyone was autistic, neurotypicals would have their own diagnosis. It's true. It's true.
Pointless small talk. They're taught that providing untruthful information to others is being polite and constantly seek praise from others through social media. All right. Of course, this idea of pathologizing neurotypical people is just a joke. But seriously, they say autistic people have challenges with shifting between ideas, thoughts, and tasks. I say neurotypical people have a hard time concentrating on their passion long enough to actually be great at it and bring them joy. They say autistic people become distressed when exposed to too many stimuli at once. I say neurotypicals have created unnecessary chaos and chronic overstimulation everywhere so that they can create and sell treatments like anti-anxiety medications, ADHD medications, spa treatments, vacation packages, all aimed at lowering our natural response to the artificial, unnecessary chaos.
Yeah. Not too sure about that one. I know where you're coming from, but I think it really depends on where you live, to be honest. Like in cities, yeah, 100%, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I do have a little bit of a, playing devil's advocate. It's like, how would it be constructed? I don't know. Like, accounting for like the amount of population density in a certain place. I don't know. So I guess.
They say autistics don't do well with complex social situations. I say neurotypicals have difficulty being authentic and they struggle with honesty in their social approach. I could go on and on with these examples forever. The fact is, neurodivergent people must identify themselves, and they've got to come together to change some of these things in this world. As of 2021, the CDC suggests that 1 in 54 children are identified as being autistic. And they insist that it's 4 times more common for boys to be identified than girls. Now think back to the year 2000. The numbers were very different. They were 1 in 150 children identified as being autistic. Now, it's very important that we not confuse the rate of identification of autism with the actual occurrence of autism. I believe that the mental health and scientific community are highly inadequate at recognizing autism. Yes. And being diagnosed with autism is largely limited to those who are able to be seen by professionals, those who have financial means to do so, meaning they've got the money to spend on assessments and private insurance. I believe the rate of autistic individuals being born throughout the world is far greater than reported, and it always has been. And I believe there are equal numbers of autistic people between genders. I know a lot of people disagree with me when I say autism itself is not the problem. The real disadvantage...
I mean, I'm sort of on the fence about whether it's an equal distribution, because I have seen some research about like particular hormones related, to developing autism, or being autistic rather, and obviously like certain genes and stuff are involved in that. It might be the case. I think there's a lot to do with people's stereotypes and stigmas related to autism, which can sometimes skew things a little bit towards boys and men sort of being diagnosed. I don't know if it's a 50-50 split though. However, if something came out that showed that, then I would be like, obviously, like, I'm not sure about that one.
Advantage, in my opinion, is that those without autism greatly outnumber those with an ASD diagnosis, and the neurotypical people are the ones who've created the rules that this disordered society is in, which autistic people are forced to live and have no real say in.
Yeah.
Autistic people never agreed to things like compound interest being the only way to get a home loan, or to being financially punished by the IRS and banking industry for being self-employed, which many autistic people are. Autistic people were never consulted.
I feel like this is a little bit of a stretch. I don't know if autistic people were in charge of this, that it would be different. Because I don't know if it's all based on logic and trying to sort everything out properly. I think there's a lot of different factors involved in it that I don't think would be necessary. I mean, bring an autistic person to like shift things about, maybe they'd probably be able to definitely like improve some things. I don't know if it would be necessarily a completely different thing though.
Consulted about the idea that some stimming behaviors are okay, while other forms of stimming are seen as bothersome to others and need to stop. They aren't the ones who decided effective communication includes not saying what you mean so you sound nicer. Neurotypical people get to be in charge of their own bodies and space, whereas autistic individuals, especially those who've been through ABA therapy, they don't have a choice. They're told when to hug people, when to shake hands, make eye contact, that they need to allow people into their space. And when an autistic child or adult melts down, they get even less control over their bodies, sometimes being forced into harmful holds or into hospitals. And they're not given what they need until they comply. Now,
nothing really to add there, but really good that he's brought this up.
After all that I've said, in reality, there's no shame being neurotypical or neurodivergent, because everybody's neurological functioning should be respected and honored as a form of diversity. So let's not feel bad for neurotypical people, and let's not be ableist toward them.
I don't know about that. That's one thing that I think I do somewhat deviate, I guess, from, because I don't like to talk about that in general. You can see there's some neurological differences which chiefly impacts other people, like psychopathy. It is a genetic thing. People are born psychopaths. Like, I don't necessarily think that we should be respecting like that kind of behavior. Although, to be honest, the majority of psychopaths don't necessarily commit such evil things. But you know, I think there's kind of crossing into like overgeneralization to some degree. I understand the intention of it. I don't think that, you know, I mean, some people might like classify me as like gatekeeping or something like that, but you know, I think that there are some inherently like disabling and negative things that people can have, which are neurological, you know, like epilepsy. I can't really see any positive sort of diversity there. I think it's usually pretty awful for the person. You know, I think it's very dependent. You know, there's got to be some level of nuance in it, but this is kind of a, you know, it's a 20-minute video, you know, and overall, I am being somewhat critical now, but that's just me. You know, there's something like the majority of what he's saying is like facts, but just some little things I would change here and there. I'm sure autistic people are capable of greed. A few billionaires spring to mind. Of course, Martin, like 100%. 100%. Let's all gang up and invade the Canary Islands, claim them the islands of Ostia. Ostia. Entities must apply for a visa to enter. I mean, there are some countries that you can't relocate to if you have an autism diagnosis. That's not cool. Yeah, never going to be able to move to New Zealand.
Them. They're doing the best they can, and they can do really great things too. Of course, I'm just joking. Neurodivergent people are essential to our humanity, and really there's no right or normal way of thinking, just as there's no right or normal ethnic culture or gender. It's all about equity of social power, and it's crucial that the world not only accept but support the idea that autistic and ADHD and other neurodivergent people are not sick and disordered, but positively different, and we need that. So,
in some ways. Again, a little bit too much generalization. I think there's some things that definitely like can make life harder for us. I don't know if, you know, that could be a lot to do with our upbringing. Perhaps the different parenting styles that we might need, you know, that haven't had as much work as perhaps parenting and educational styles that are okay for like neurotypicals, perhaps. I do think that's a bit generalization. And so, some people do have this view where they think that if the world was, as you said, Martin, like if the world was run by autistic people, that there would be no issues. I don't see it like that. I see autistic and neurotypical individuals or neurodiverse individuals as offering different things. I do think to some degree neurotypicals do have some very strong positive traits only generally over perhaps autistic people, and a lot of things that we have in general, better at than neurotypicals would be. So it's kind of it's a coexistence, but I wish that more neurotypicals would see just how impactful including autistic people in the process of important things, in the development of things, can be. 100%. It's like a cohabitation kind of interaction, but I think that with the world that we have and the way that we treat autistic people and the lack of support that we give autistic people definitely holds us back in life and definitely holds society back and to a certain extent for not including us.
So, what might an autistic world look like? Well, why don't you tell me? In the comments below, let me know what a world designed by autistic and ADHD people might be like. I do read your comments and respond to many of them. My last point I want to make is
I think a lot more straightforward. It'll be sunshine and rainbows and everyone's going to smile at each other. Oh, they're not going to smile at each other. We don't like the indirect communication. Maybe not. No idea. I think I'd say a lot more straightforward. 100%. Especially the social aspects of it would be a lot different, I would say.
is I want to talk about what well-functioning, mentally healthy autistic individuals might be like. I mean, it's always been about what an autistic person that's struggling is like, never what it's like to be doing really well. So let's change that right now.
Well, it's not a disorder.
To me, an autistic individual doing well in this life is someone who feels respected and dignified. They feel believed, and they're able to operate in this world in a way that's free from triggers or provides tools and accommodations to greatly reduce them. But how could that look in the real world? It means the autistic person wakes up well rested in the morning because they went to bed feeling confident about their next day. And if they have sleep problems, they have the proper, affordable treatment for that. If they eat breakfast, they have a healthy choice of affordable and available foods that their bodies don't reject. As they leave the home, they have ideas as to what to expect going forward, and their families, their friends, and employers all understand that consistency is important to them and give them as much advance notice of unavoidable changes as possible. They know that their personal space is going to be respected at work and with friends and family, and others know when talking to them that they should mean what they say and say what they mean. They're treated with dignity and respect by all people. Their office or their workplace has lights that are dimmable, and they have an opportunity to have a workspace where they can get up and move around, where they can stim, and they can have window shades that lower, and their office is free from triggering sounds and smells. They set their own schedule and take frequent breaks throughout the workday, and they're free to come and go as needed for self-care. After work, they might take time to decompress, or if they become overwhelmed, maybe even have a chance to melt down or shut down for a little bit, retreat for that. And they know that this may be part of their process of honoring their autism. So they take time for that, and people respect that. For dinner, they've got a wide array of foods available that were delivered that are both nutritious and cater to their sensory needs. They may get phone calls from friends or text, and everybody understands that it may be short and there may not be much talking going back and forth, but they still feel good knowing people care enough to call and text or chat. They go outside and they spend some time exercising in the woods and near water where their brain is most at home. They get home and they decide to end their evening by watching their favorite YouTube videos and chatting with friends online, and only feel the need to do that for an hour or two because they're not retreating from anything. They set out their clothes and prepare for the next day. They may see a text from friends to go out and do something as a group later on that week, but the friends ask them far enough in advance that they can plan for it and mentally and emotionally settle into the idea. Then they lay down and they sleep, possibly with their weighted blanket made with sensory-friendly materials, knowing that they had a great day and they're content with doing it all over again tomorrow. They even have the option to work at home when they feel the need and can take ample time off for their interests. So that's just one example of a great...
Doesn't that sound like utter effing bliss? The funny thing is, this is very, very close to the way that I design my life, as much as I possibly can. You know, I obviously have, you know, some privileges which definitely like allow me to do that. Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like, got no qualms with that. That sounds like a great idea. If you can do that, if you can get that, that would be pretty much ideal. I mean, this guy's speaking facts. I'm quite like surprised that I haven't come across him before. Let's have a look at some of the comments. Still got a little bit more to go. Wow. 2 years ago, 24,000 views. Very much 200. Oh wait, 242,000. Wow. Man, this video is gorgeous. Well, let's get it. It's only got like 20 minutes left.
Day
20
for an
seconds.
autistic person, in my opinion. And it just happened to be a single person example that I just gave. But if you have an example, please share it in the comments below. Email me. Do whatever you need to do to like flesh that out in your mind. Because maybe we can all borrow from each other's ideas and all have some great days. I'm Dr. Service, and I hope this helps you in your neurodiverse universe.
He even uses similar phrases to me as well. So you can like, oh, what a great guy. Beautiful. Beautiful. I say. Awesome stuff. Thank you very much, Neurodivergent Doctor. Go over and check out his channel, 100. I'm definitely going to be watching a few of his videos in the future. Absolutely amazing video. And very consumable for, I think, a lot of neurotypicals as well. You know, very relatable. Good examples, good ways of framing it to help people understand. Beautiful indeed. Magnificent even. Stupendous. My lord, yes. I mean, only a few things that I think I disagree with slightly, even. Like, this man's got it all sorted out. He's a doctor, he's like got the autistic experience behind him. Holy mother. I don't think he's posting anymore, but his back catalogue is all good. Why not? How dare he starve us of content like this? Get back on here, Neurodivergent Doctor. I'm going to find you on Instagram and grab you and shake you and get you to make more. A really great video. Probably one of the best ones that I've watched on stream, actually, I would say.